Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. The UIAAA would not be able to broadcast this podcast without the support of our business partners. Thank you to all the gold and silver business partners of the UIAAA, BSN Sports, and our contact Jeremy Macy. Final Forms AMP with contacts Julie Renner and Clay Burnett. Granite Canyon Wealth and our contact Megan Palazzo. Jostens with contact Molly Shaheen. NCSA, Next College Student Athlete, and our contact Paul Putnam. VNN Varsity News Network and our contact in Utah, Jason Jones. Thanks again to all of the gold and silver UIAAA business partners.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutchhunter, and today we are thrilled to have with us Pete Shambo, who is calling in not from his home in New York, but who is calling in somewhere in Virginia as he's hiking along the Appalachia Trail. And so we will get to that soon enough. But welcome, Pete. How are you?
I'm great, Hutch. One of my greatest purchases recently was a hairbrush. I had not brushed my hair in 46 days, so it was nice to put a brush through it.
All right. Well, before we get to your stories on the trail, let's take our listeners back a little ways. Growing up, your college days, your high school days, what you participated in sports, how you got involved in sports, and basically what led you to be one of the great ADs in the United States.
Well, one, thanks for that compliment. I'm not sure that's necessarily accurate, but I hope my story to others, at least of my generation. I went to a small school in upstate New York. The school's name was Copenhagen in the town of Denmark. And I had 36 kids in my senior class. It was a K-12 building. And all of us pretty much worked on or lived near farms. And so farming was a way of life there. People would drive their tractors to school, show up in their barn boots, have chafe from the hay mow in their hair type of thing. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I have 7 brothers and sisters. So I had a large family, and I was influenced first because sport was the only outlet in that area. There, back then you might get 3 TV stations if somebody holds on to the antenna on a good day. And so I had a traditional mom who would send you outside, don't come in until I call you for lunch, and then don't come in until I call you for dinner. So we made up games, a field was dead because we didn't have people, or there was a creek involved, or any number of things. My poor mom used to pay for guitar lessons, and I'd go downtown and as soon as they dropped me off and they were out of sight, I'd go up the street and play basketball with my buddies instead. So my poor mom, I put her through, and she paid a lot of money for those lessons. But I was influenced most by 2 physical educators in my school, and they happened to both be coaches. One was Jim Buck, and one was John Johnson. John Johnson was someone who my father knew because his wife had worked summers at a plant where my dad was working. So my dad became a fan of Coach Johnson, who was coaching varsity basketball. And Coach Butts was the soccer coach. And in that small school, you had a choice of 1 sport per season, with the exception of the winter. You could either wrestle or play basketball. And so literally we'd have people who would help finish chores at the barn so somebody could make the game at night, could go over and help finish milking or whatever. So we'd make the bus. You could have probably robbed just about any house in town on the night of a game that was out of town, because it was like French Lick, Indiana. Everybody traveled out and back together as a group. It was that kind of. Both those gentlemen just had influence on me because they seemed like they loved what they did, and they shared that passion with kids. And Coach Butts in particular took an interest in me, wanted to know what my plans were beyond school. And of course, at that time, I could barely think about what was the next day going to be, what would do the next day, let alone, what was I going to do in 4 years. Ended up leaving high school. I did not have great grades. I was not interested in school. I was interested in sports, so sports kept me eligible. Went to a small college called Morrisville, ATC. That was an ag and tech college, 2-year school at the time. It's a 4-year school now. Went there, didn't know why I was there. I wanted to play soccer and I wanted to go to school, but I didn't have a clue why I was there. After about a semester, I got an invitation to leave because my grades were bad. So I got lucky, and a friend of mine from high school decided to move into the college and able to stay, and got my grades up to I'll say a passing level where I was able to complete the associate's degree there. And finally, I transferred to Brockport State, SUNY school here in upstate New York. And I finally knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a physical education teacher like my two heroes in high school, Mr. Butts and Mr. Johnson. Once I reached Brockport, I had no trouble with grades, 4.0. I did play soccer there. I met my wife there, which is probably the biggest blessing in my world. 35 years together this year as a couple, as married couple. And so from Brockport, I did student teaching at a small town called Geneseo, which also had a SUNY school in it. And I got lucky enough to get placed in that school for my student teaching. And there was a gentleman by the name of Ted Bondi there. Ted was highly involved in the local chapter of the New York State AAA, what's called Chapter 5. And he introduced me to the professional side of being not only a coach, but an athletic director. And so that was my first introduction to that. I taught at Geneseo, loved it. I taught elementary, middle school, high school, coached 3 sports. And then at one point I got a call from the superintendent at the end of a summer, and I just run a soccer camp. So I thought for sure I'd done something wrong, something had gone bad. And come to find out, they were looking through the file and saw that I'd taken some administrative classes and asked me if I wanted to be a TOSA, teacher on special assignment, become the assistant principal for the middle school, high school, and the athletic director. Well, being a dummy, I said yes, because I thought that's a great thing. I could do something different. They said I could still coach. Of course, I had no clue what that was going to entail. I was a new father as of that March of that same year, and we had opened a new business around December. So you have to imagine this. I'm the athletic director. I'm the assistant principal for the middle school, high school, a new dad, and opened a new business. I was good at nothing, literally nothing. And I was still, I was still trying to coach 2 sports at the time. So my wife literally slapped me in the head. Hey, something's got to give here. I interviewed for the job that I spent the remainder of my career in at Penfield. And it was one of those mid-year openings, Hutch. So yeah. It was the situation where I thought, well, I'll go do these interviews and I'll get some practice because I hadn't had an interview in 13 years, and I'll get through those, get some, a good feeling for it. And then when June comes around and the real positions open up, well, I interviewed with 3 people and I got a call back, and I thought, how nice was that? I got a call back. Next interview was 17 people from the community and the school. And you could tell there was a lot of interest in this district about finding the right person. I went there and I happened to be sick. I happened to have, I don't know, strep throat or something. And every time they asked me a question, my throat would tighten up and I'd start coughing. Well, they were so kind to me, offering me water. And I'm like, no, I just don't know the answer to the question. I need to buy a little time here. They all thought that was funny, you get that first connection with people. And I had decided before I went there, I wasn't going to answer any question the way I thought they wanted to hear it. I was going to answer it from the heart, because I would never want to end up someplace where, it wasn't the right fit. Sure enough, get a call back. And this time it's just with the superintendent. Her name was Susan Gray, and she had a big influence on me as well. And I became her choice. And I remember covering the receiver when they called me to offer me the job. And I called my wife to tell her, and she said, well, did you accept it? And I said, no, I was too nervous. I told them I needed to talk to you first. And so I ended up calling them back. I never looked back. That was the best decision of my career. So Rowe County Public High School Athletic Association, where I'm lucky enough to be immediately mentored by Denny Freeze. Now, Denny Freeze, as you know, past president, National Association, past president of the State Association. Denny takes me under his wing right away, as most leaders do. They identify somebody, and he has this way of making you volunteer, even though you didn't want to.
Exactly.
And I got voluntold. No, he just had this magical influence over me and many others, by the way. And I never wanted to disappoint Denny, and he always pointed me in a direction, but never pushed me in a direction. And I soon became highly involved in not only Chapter 5, but the New York State AAA, where I eventually served as president of that association. And I'm proud to say I'm going to be inducted into their Hall of Fame in March, which I just found out while I was on the trail, actually. So it was pretty cool. And through that, I started going to the Summer Institute in Cape Cod. 2004, I think, was the first year. Now I've attended every single one, and this summer will be the first time I have to miss because I'm hiking. But so I started going there. I've taken all but maybe 3 or 4 of the courses that are offered by the NIAAA. And I don't know if you remember Walter Sargent. You probably do.
Walt's a real good friend of mine. I know, well, parenthetically. So Walt is hosting the NEDC in 2004.
Great.
At Oceanside. And so actually, so I'm there. I think Holly's there, a bunch of us. So I actually taught at the very first summer summit that was there.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Walter was there and Denny, and they ran it for 10 years. And I will say they were done. They done their part. And Steve Young, who I know you know, and myself, we just loved the Summer Institute. We didn't want it to die on the vine, so we took it over. And so we've run it for the last 8 years. And I just talked to Steve today, and it is going to take place this summer live. We had to cancel last summer due to COVID-19, but it's going to be June 27th through the 30th, Hutch. I know you asked me this interview today. It's June 27th to the 30th. Registration is open. It is at the section1.org website, and you can register through Family ID. As part of the Summer Institute, offering 15 courses and the CAA exam, just as we have always done. And I know that Steve changed up some of the courses from last summer. We've always tried to be on the cutting edge, offering the new classes that are offered. We get a lot of, I'll say, repeat customers at the Cape. And again, it's on Cape Cod and Brewster, Mass. We get a lot of repeat customers for 2 reasons. One, the Institute offers a lot of really new courses. So even the person that's been there every year can take courses. The second thing is that we've always focused on family first there. So when you come, we want you to bring your family. We run a reception that's open to families. We run a bocce tournament there. We offer information for the family on where to go when they're not in classes. We've been smart enough to offer 3 classes in the morning and 2 in the afternoon because we notice that a lot of the attendance goes down in the afternoon. It's awful hard to look out a window and see that blue ocean and white beach and want to be in class. I don't care if Lee Green, and Lee has taught many times there, but we get a lot of repeat customers. And as you know, and you've talked to me about coming, I don't have to worry about asking instructors to come. I got people asking me when to the Cape. And so that's almost a problem in itself, because you want to give everyone an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Some people, we say, have right to first refusal, which right now is Holly Farnese. Holly's been there every year. Lee was one of those people. Yep, but Lee has told us physically the site is not conducive to his condition, and so it makes it difficult for him. But always come in and always offer to do it for free. Gary Stevens, I mean, all great people have been there yourself. So I mean, it's always an all-star cast. Quite often we also get a lot of internationals, maybe 3 to 5 people from international schools that want to come in from all over the world, and that always adds a nice flavor.
And that's, I would say that's impressive, because like you say, I think the first one was 2004. So this has got to be what, the 15th, 16th year, 17th, maybe something like that. And
20.
And so you won't be there. So I guess Steve's shouldering the load, because you'll be somewhere in the middle of Pennsylvania, I'm assuming, or maybe into New York by the time this happens, depending on how far you've traveled.
A couple of people from Section 1. Corey Parker's one name that I can remember. And I apologize to the other gentleman. I can't think of it right now. But people are always going to step up to help with the Summer Institute. And so Steve does have people who are going to help him with everything from registration to setting up the rooms for courses, to introducing the instructor, to collecting the surveys at the end, all the stuff that goes along with that. There's a lot of work that goes into running a Summer Institute. It seems like a great thing, but today, Hutch, I only hiked 9 miles today. And as I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking about the Summer Institute, and we average right around 55 to 60 people a year.
And that's a good number. That's incredible.
Yep. Yeah. And we've had as high as 83 there. But if I use that number of 50, and let's say we've done it 20 years, that's 1,000 directors, right? Over that time. And each of those people average 3 courses per attendance. Matter of fact, we had to make it so that they would minimally take 2, because people were just coming and taking 1 and we'd never see them again.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you, that's 3,000 LTI courses having been taken by athletic administrators. And it's probably much higher than that, because there's some people that come and take 4 and 5 courses. Countless number of people who received their certification there, their CAA, taking the exam there. So that probably is the big feel good about how many fellow directors we've served in that time. And to boot, with what directors do, we've offered them time with their family, and it's been an important part of what we've done.
Yeah, and that's got to be a big seller. I think, Roger Brown from New York, I assume, correct? Retired now?
Yeah.
Well, see, I had never known Roger. He was in my 790 class in 2004, and we've been friends ever since. That's where I first met him.
Yeah, wonderful man, and contributing in New York State every year. He's been retired for 10 years. So.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go back to something before we go on to the next topic. You mentioned very early on that you had 7 siblings. Is that correct?
Well, there's 7 of us, including myself. Yes.
There's 7 of us. So the question I have is if you have any specific stories, because I have 8 siblings. There's 9 in my family. So I think generally the athletic directors that listen to this, probably most of them aren't going to have 7 or 8 brothers or sisters for that matter. Anything that, I guess athletically as you were growing, I would think, how many brothers do you have?
Well, I had one. Unfortunately, my only brother has passed away at this point. So he and I did a lot together, probably got in a lot of trouble together, things I won't talk about here, but,
sure.
Having 5 sisters, 4 of them older, we were farm associated family, and we were also Catholic. And if you know anything about Catholics, my parents were practicing Catholics. And so they were just trying to have a hired man. And I was number 5 out of 7. And so that was the first one that they go to the barn. You see, the girls never go to the barn, Hutch. The girls stayed in the house and did whatever was done there at that time.
That's what I figured.
And, nowadays that would be completely different. So, I remember things like my parents always had us go to church on Sunday. One funny thing that happened to me is I was an altar boy, and my parents with 7 kids, we'd have to go to the later mass. So we'd go to a place called New Boston, which is about 7 miles from my hometown, but it was a very rural, up in the woods type of church, but it was a cool place. Mm-hmm. It had an elevated altar. And of course, an altar boy, you have to wear the cassock, the gown that comes over.
Yeah.
Well, I was just a little duffer, and the cassock was always too big for me. And I remember this like it was yesterday, because my mother was mortified. I came down to get the offering from the adults that came from the back of the church, right? And I'm carrying the host. And as I went to step up the staircase, I stepped on the front of my cassock. And so I tripped myself, and the hosts go flying up in the air like snowflakes. The place erupts. The priest, who took pity on the family for years, was mortified. If he was angry, he didn't beat me, but he was unhappy with me. And I remember my poor mom after that church mass just being, beside herself. And just simple little things like that come to mind. 2 sisters who were trying to learn how to smoke cigarettes, and they had a Ford Falcon, and they were smoking one a cigarette through the window. Well, the cigarette flies in the back window. Now, if you remember, the old cars used to have those seats that were made out of straw. Remember how the bedding or the cushion? Well, the seat started smoking. They keep coming in the house to get glass water out and dumping. Of course, it's smoldering. My two oldest sisters, Chris and Jess, drove that Falcon all the way to Watertown, which was 22 miles, to tell my dad the car was on fire. And all because they didn't want to tell my mom. Just goofy stuff like that, this comes to mind. But growing up in the large.
Yeah, you mentioned, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I'm good. I could tell stories all day long like that.
So you mentioned Watertown. It's strange. I know where Watertown is just because it's across the, it's across the river from Ontario, where I served a mission when I was younger. And and I know where Watertown is because if you're familiar with Harry Chapin, the singer at all, one of his songs takes place there.
Oh yeah.
And so obviously Penfield is somewhere close to Watertown. So I'm assuming you're north of Syracuse and west of Syracuse, but east of Rochester, then obviously in that neighborhood of the.
Well, where I grew up was near Watertown, but now I live in Western New York, between Syracuse and Buffalo, right up on Lake Ontario at Rochester. And so Rochester is the home of Code.
Right.
Xerox.
So you're above the Finger Lakes then.
That's where yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Beautiful area by the
now that I have my geography straight. So let me ask you this, Pete. Share with our listeners here locally in Utah and across the U.S. Talk about your journey with the certification committee, because it's so much different than, let's say, it was even 10 years ago. And so I know you, Dr. Jake, who's also been a host on my show, and I've been on his show, but talk about to our ADs across the nation about the certification committee and how it's changed.
Yeah, so I've almost been on the committee 10 years, and that sounds like an awful, terribly long time, but it's the way the timing of that went. Typically, your service on the committee is a max of 6 years. And when I came on board, same as it is today, you'd fill out an application, typically that's sent out right around the conference, and you'd list any committees that you'd be interested in. Well, I was interested in certification because I was the very first person in my area of the state to get their CAA and CMAA. And so I wanted to bolster that. I just couldn't see why that wasn't more important to more people. And mainly it was because they didn't have the information. So I applied. I happened to have known Holly Farnese, who was at the acting secretary at the time. And, so I reached out to her personally, told her that I had a deep interest in it. And I was fortunate. The secretary had a big influence at the time as well of who would get placed on a committee.
Still does.
And Roger Brown, who you mentioned, was rolling off. And so Section 1 rep, and I happened to be the only Section 1 person that had applied. So I ended up on the committee. I loved the committee. I was intimidated by the committee, to be honest with you. And I think that's something that I've tried to work on as the chair, that when someone comes on that committee, hey, we all put our pants on one leg at a time, eat milk and or drink milk and eat cookies, all that good stuff. Long of it is I was mentored strongly by Sherry Stice and Ed Lockwood. Now, the committee had never had a chair in its history. It had always been Ed and Sherry coming from that leadership team, that PDA group.
Right.
As I ran for the at-large position on the board, the same year I was going to roll off, I chose not to try to double dip, and I did not apply for a vice chair because they had created vice chair. They hadn't created a chairperson spot yet. They started with the vice chair. Lannis Robinson won that election. I'm a great leader, and if you've ever run for an at-large, it's kind of an emotional thing to go up there in front of all your people, do the speech. and run for the office of a volunteer and then not to be elected. Well, fortunately for me, Sherry Spice thought enough of me to call me up and say, hey, we'd like you to consider being our chair. And I was like, our chair? I said, don't we have vice chair? And she goes, well, I've talked to the leadership and they're going to allow us to have a chair. So, I was taken back by that because how do you become the chair of the certification committee? Yeah. Long and short of it is Tall Graf, Jake Von Sheer were there as the vice chairs, two outstanding leaders unto themselves. And we really did in the beginning. Sherry has mentored me along with Ed, and we have developed in the past 4 years that I've been there, 3 years, well, this is 4, that committee has completely evolved. We've broken ceilings on every single thing from CAA completions to CMAA projects. We broke 1,000 recently on that. So I take a lot of pride in that. We've facilitated multiple sessions where we explain how to do your project. And I think there's a lot of intimidation about the CMAA project. Oral projects have become about a 50% of the total of CMAA projects. Right. The committee now, in my eyes, functions more as a team, where I remember when I first went there, we just, we went to our meeting and we got read the agenda and we left. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And what you do is, you're reading PDFs all year long. Right. You're reading projects. Quite honestly, that's intimidating because if I get, Hutch's project and I know he's put a year's worth of work into it, who am I to say that project's not worthy? And so it's a little intimidating, believe it or not, to be on the other side of the project. I've really become comfortable with that other side. I've really felt like, and I've gotten several thank yous along with other committee members who do the same thing. We really helped guide people through that process. And we've done everything we can to take away the intimidation part and get people to understand it's just the doing part, and with, there's always a silver lining things. And COVID last year gave a lot of athletic directors time to do professional development that they wouldn't have had. And so we saw an uptick in both CAA and CMAA completions. And I think our next challenge is to carry that momentum and to get the message out to that next generation of ADs as we see this big turnover in our country, across the country of I'll say, seasoned athletic directors moving on. These newer / younger directors may not know the value of, why would I get certified? I can do the job without it. And I think our responsibility is to educate them. You asked me questions that I'd tell a new AD. And one of the things I do is I would say a new AD in the first 4 years, you're not identified by someone in your own league to be mentored by. Ask someone, seek someone out. I constantly challenge people who have their CMAAs to reach out to those new people in their league and offer the help and invite them to go through the process. The other thing I would say to a new athletic director is slow yourself down a bit and not try to change the world in a day. Take the time it takes to observe, watch, listen, and listen is very important. Hear what people are really saying. People want to be heard. And then make an action plan. And when you make an action plan, don't do it in isolation. Make sure that you are inclusive of other people, because once you get them on board and it's their idea, it's so much easier to move things forward. Those would be two things that I would say to new athletic directors. I love mentoring other people. I love helping people with their projects. So it's something I wish more of my peers were willing to do and thought about doing, to be honest with you.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that answer. Let me ask you this. I would have thought, being outside that committee, that the oral presentations for the CMA project would be more than 50%, but you're saying it's right about 50. I remember Utah's kind of proud of the fact that Jamie Sheets, who I know that was, I think, the guinea pig, for lack of a better word. But he was, well, I tell you what, after that, he was all over it. I think we've had maybe 4 or 5 CMAA since, and I think they all went the oral route because for them it worked and it was easy.
Yeah, I would tell you that it's probably a little less than 50%, and it's not necessarily. I want to avoid the word easier. It's not easier. You're still
Different.
writing the project,
Right?
It is different. You're presenting that same information that you had to write down. Now you're presenting it orally, and some people love to talk about stuff, so it's easier for them to do that. Other people love to write. Funny, I don't know if you know Dr. Caleb Stoppel at all.
I know who
He's an outstanding leader. He did his CMAA project on a virtual presentation that he did, but he did it in a written style. So, here's a guy who's comfortable with virtual and doing stuff presentation wise, but he chose to write his project out. So it's this weird hybrid. And I really wanted him included in an article that's coming up for the magazine that you'll see the process from Lisa Gingras as well for written. And so it's just, it's about 50%, Hutch.
Fascinating. Well, let me get to what I've been dying to ask you, is because I've heard about people that hike parts of the Appalachia Trail, or they spend a month and they go a couple of 100 miles. But I do not know anyone. You were going to be the first one who is going to hike the actual trail, and obviously to live and tell about it. My question is, I'm sure that you've hiked sections of it before, but why this desire now to hike the trail once you've retired from being an active athletic director?
Well, I started out by section hiking. Section hiking is doing pieces of the trail. And I had chosen originally to start down in Georgia, and I would take my spring breaks that we'd all get, and I would go do a 100-mile section. I was able to do that for 4 years, and I was going to do it last year, but with COVID, they were asking people to stay off the trail, and not knowing, I didn't go.
Yeah.
The rationale for doing it when I retired was I always wanted to through hike the trail, but you can't through hike when you're working.
Exactly.
It's going to take anywhere from 5 to 6 months to complete an average hike. My goal was to finish around the end of August, first week of September, which meant I need to average from my start date, which was March 14th. I needed to average 14 miles a day, including days that I didn't hike. So, on a day I'm not hiking, I've got to take those miles and average them into another day.
Right.
I was doing some math in my tent last night, see how close I am, and I'm very close to being on target as far as my mileage, where I am today, and finishing on those days. What I really would need to do is I've got to average about 100 miles a week now over a 7-day period. Now I can do whatever number of miles I want on any of those 7 days, including 0. But the average has got to be right around 100 a week in order to make my timeline. And I want to enjoy the trip. I'm here at one of the nicest hostels on the whole trail. It's a rustic log cabin with traditional chinking on the outside, and they grow all their own vegetables, and they make a meal tonight. I'm in a single room, which is rare. Usually I sleep in a bunkhouse with anywhere from 6 to 10 people, and sleep is hard to come by, believe it or not. Snoring and burping and all the other bodily functions
snoring and getting up all night. Sure, I understand that.
Yeah. Then the things that you look forward to, and this is going to sound gross and funny. A shower. I took a shower today. First time in 6 days I had a shower. Sitting on a regular toilet are things that come to mind.
Yeah.
I did my laundry for time in 6 days. So I know this sounds bad, but imagine you're only carrying 2 pair of underwear and you're hiking for 6 days. That math does not work out.
Yeah.
So most of the times, by the time I make it to into town or into the hostel, most of my clothes could probably walk in on their own. and make it into the hostel without me. So, and you can smell a hiker from a good distance away. And I can usually tell a through hiker from a day hiker if you're downwind, because a day hiker, you can still smell detergent on their clothes. Now, I did my laundry today. No matter how clean my laundry is, 5 minutes after I put it on, it smells like I haven't taken a bath in a week. So it's just what it is.
Because you haven't. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. I had no idea, not having been on the trail. You and I have talked before. I've hiked quite a bit in national parks out west here, but I've never hiked anything like the AT. But there's trail names for people, I guess. Are they just through hikers that have the trail names, or even the section hikers have trail names?
Well, the history on trail name is this. You can choose to give yourself a trail name, but it's not very common. Most of the time you earn a trail name. Okay. If you section hike and you've done a lot of miles, there's a good chance you've gotten a name. Most of the time the name comes from something you've either done or not done. It's just goofy stuff. My trail name is Roll On. And I'm going to tell you a quick history on Roll On. So I originally did not have a trail name. My trail name was just Pete. And I was section hiking a few years back, and I was coming into an area called Fontana Dam area. And it's a very long, steady, sometimes steep downhill. And the person I was hiking with at the time, their name was Compass, and it had to do with them trying to find their way in life and blah, blah, blah. Well, that person said to me, well, why don't you be rolling? And I said, rolling? Yeah, I like rolling down these hills. And I'm like, oh man, I like that. Rolling. That sounds great. I'm going to go with that. Well, I went with that, and I hiked to Klingman's Dome that year. So that's the highest point on the AT. It's like 662 feet. And the next year I start at Klingman's Dome, and I'm going to hike to Hot Springs, just under 100 miles. And I end up hiking with this gentleman from Southern Georgia, and he has a heavy Southern drawl, and he could not say rolling. He'd call me roll on.
Roll on.
Roll on. Roll on. Everybody around us thought my trail name was Roll On. So I ended up going with Roll On. And my vlog, if anybody's interested in following, is Rolling, ROLLING, on the AT 2021. And I post a video each day. I know you've been watching because I see a comment, and I love the fact that you send me the music themes. That's your part in that.
And so, I've got one I'm just ready to put on for today. When you left it was Hurricane something. So I've got something for you.
Oh, yeah. So I like I've walked 500 miles. I will walk 500 more. I got that one too. So
I knew that. I knew you'd get a laugh out of that one.
Yeah, I do enjoy the feedback from you. I very much appreciate it. And the support on the trail is important, So
if they want to go to YouTube, which is where I watch yours every day or every other day, it's just roll on. It's rolling on the AT.
Roll 2021.
Yeah, and so they can access it that way.
Yep, and I've just uploaded 5 more episodes today. I release them slowly, so the episodes that you're seeing are days behind where I actually am. And as I sit here in this comfy chair right now, I'm at mile 625, traveling north out of 2,193 miles that need to be done. So,
yeah, because I just barely gave you the I Would Walk 500 Miles song here a couple of days ago, and now you're already up to 625, and it hasn't been a week. So I get that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I understand that hikers midnight's coming up about 7:00 your time, which is pretty quick. So let me just finish up with this question. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
That's a good one. Well, because your show's mostly about athletic administration, I'm lucky enough, fortunate enough to be the national certification chair. I wish that you might have asked me, why should I get certified?
Okay, then
And
tell our audience why they should be certified, because that's a great question, and I know that's a question on a lot of the minds of the people in Utah and across the nation.
I'm going to screw this quote up, but I think it was Billy Graham that said, a coach will influence more people in one season than most people do in a lifetime. And so now if you take that a step further and you talk about an athletic director, and say you take someone like me who had a large suburban school and you had 140 staff. If I can influence positively 140 people, just think of the math on that, of how those people could influence. I don't think I'd want to go to a doctor that wasn't certified. I don't want to take my car to a technician that doesn't have a certification in working on stuff safety wise. I can't imagine why we as professionals, as athletic administrators, would not want to be certified in the profession that we've chosen. In truth, a district could take anyone off the street and give them a blessing, say, hey, you're the new athletic director. You and I both know that that is a guarantee for failure.
Absolutely.
And the NIAAA is programs for athletic directors by athletic directors. And so the information that are included in the courses that we offer are timely. They're pertinent to what's going on in society at this time. They are constantly updated to be pertinent to what we're doing in our day. And well, you can take all those courses and not get certified. Why wouldn't you become a certified athletic administrator? And even then, because we're all competitive people, we live in the competitive world. Why would you want to stop at, I made the team? Why wouldn't you want to be a starter and go get your CMAA, your certified master athletic administrator? And when the NIAAA sends you the letter congratulating you on that certification, they say that you have now become part of an exclusive group. And it's a true statement, because it's people who have gone above and beyond what's required of them, typically by any state. And they've done it because they want to serve their community and their programs in the best way they can. And being certified is one surefire way to do that.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you for that answer. That wraps it up for another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Pete Shambo, the certification chair for the NIAAA and current hiker on the Appalachian Trail. Pete, thanks for being with us today.
Hutch, thanks for having me so much, and thanks for reaching out and continuing to support me on my hike. It's really fun to have that happen. Thank you.